Yeah.
Here we are, Coalition Purple, back
Yep.
on the air.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Enjoying the nice, cool weather. I thought we were done with winter, but here we are.
I have to admit, I always like the cool weather.
Yeah, definitely. It is a nice change. Anyways, I was just thinking, we have done, this will be our 52nd episode, which equates to a year. Of course, it's taken us like 18 months to do that.
Yeah.
but but yeah, it was just it hit me. It was like 52nd episode, which is kind of cool. And but what's really been fun for me is we occasionally get comments and all that,
Hmm.
and it makes me feel good that we must be doing something right because about half of them, seem to indicate, oh, you guys are. Well, first, almost 100% of them can say something that we're old, which I found interesting.
Not news to me.
No ageism going on there. But then, like, half of them think that, we're Trump loyalists, and the other half, think we're shills for the Democrats, which tells me
Must be doing
that
something
we're
right.
onto something right, right?
Yeah.
It's like back in my reporter days, it was like whenever you write a story, if as long as you got like half of the people complaining that they were, you're siding with one side and the other half was complaining you're siding with the other, it's like, hey, that's a badge of honor. I must be doing something right because you're not taking sides. You're just trying to figure out whatever the problem is or story is in our case. So, anyways, I found that funny, and I was reminded of that because I was listening to this podcast last night, and this person was just going off the rails about all the people who are in third parties or independents are the ones that have created the chaos that Trump has inflicted. And so it was all, and I was like, I'm thinking, third party had absolutely no impact whatsoever on
Yeah.
electing Trump. I mean, it was like compared to some years where I think there probably was some influence, but this one was clearly not anything to do with the third party candidate in any real meaningful way. And I'm just like, oh, well, and that's number one. Number two, I think so many people have this thought that all around presidential politics. And what we really talk about is, as much as possible, is not that. It's about the local stuff and how you can make an impact and all that. So we still have our work cut out for us. I guess that's the bottom line of it.
Yeah. And I always go back to sort of this idea that, somehow the third party vote are spoilers. And
Right.
I come back to the same idea, which is if the two parties put out candidates that were worth voting for, then there wouldn't be any
Right.
spoilers because everybody would be like, "Oh wow, what a great candidate! I'll vote for that one." But
Right.
when the parties are putting out stuff that's terrible, the problem isn't the third parties, being spoilers. The problem is that there are too many people too willing to vote for awful candidates.
Right. No, exactly. And, at the end of the day, which I've told all my Democrat friends, I mean, the reason Trump got elected is because Democrats didn't turn out in key states. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, the third party had nothing to do with it because, like you, I'm sure you get questioned a lot about why you would kind of side with a third party or an independent, just be an independent.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, well, A, let's not even talk about presidential politics because there's no impact really.
Yeah.
And it's really focused on trying to build from the ground up a new way of thinking and let's clean the slate and let's not get in these little fights over very partisan issues. Let's just try to solve problems, period.
Yeah.
So
I just want
anyway,
people to think about the issues.
yeah,
And like you were saying, like some of the people maybe like what we say, and maybe some of the people don't like what we say, or we're still for this side or for that side. All I want people to do is think about why they're voting, what they're voting for. Because as soon
right.
as you start doing that, your eyes open real quick and like, man, I am voting for garbage. We need
Yeah,
to do something differently. And then that's where the third party stuff comes in. I want people to have opened their minds. So when the time comes and some new party or new person comes along and is offering a better path forward, people are willing to take it as opposed to being just trapped within the walls of whatever tiny party aligned space that they're in. So as I say, you can love us, you can hate us, that's fine.
Whatever.
But just
No,
think about things. Think about what you would want to see to change things. And as I think that's so important because there's so much propaganda out there. People just saying that they should hate the other side for this reason or that reason, but that doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help.
no, it doesn't. So it's just fascinating to kind of hear the reactions of that stuff. And to your point, just opening your mind, I know on the whole tariff thing that's going on right now, obviously there's a lot of chaos going on over
Mhm.
that. But tariffs in of themselves have been used forever. I mean, for one thing or another, it's nothing.
Yeah.
The concept's obviously not new. It's all in how you implement it. But the one part that I've never really understood is I was listening to somebody talk about the manufacturing industry, and so much
Mhm.
of the tariff has been focused around manufacturing. And this person made the point, which I don't know. I never really looked at employment figures that much until I heard this, that the number of employees in manufacturing hasn't really changed in huge leaps in a long time. I mean, I think back in I wrote that's what I was looking at. Back in 1979, it was about its highest point, 19 million. Today, it's about 13 million. And that's but the point of that is during that time frame is when so much technology happened
Mhm.
and automation happened, because at the same time the productivity levels in manufacturing just took off. So we were doing more, we were able to produce more with fewer people. And part of that is, yes, stuff was offshored and things like, there's no question some of that's going on. But the other part of it is that doesn't get talked about very much is the automation and getting much better at doing creating more with fewer people. And the point the person was making was there's so much focus on the manufacturing and these tariffs are going to bring back manufacturers and all that kind of stuff. And his point is, we might get a few to come back, but it's not going to probably impact actual employment very much at all
Yeah.
because it has changed so much. The landscape has changed so much because manufacturing employment today only represents, when you look at all employment, only represents, there's only about 10% of the employment in manufacturing. And that really hasn't changed a whole lot. It's gone up from like between 9 and 11% for decades.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things where you just got to stop and think, okay, I think it's good to make things here in the US, no question about it. But the impact it's going to have, kind of negligible.
Well, the thing is, it's interesting because tariffs are a tax, right? So
Absolutely.
again, and I've said this on the show before, the only purpose of taxation, as far as I'm concerned, is to provide revenue for the government. So when you start talking about tariffs, you start having to look at the tax base as a whole. So if we're going to use tariffs to create revenue for the government, then maybe we don't need other sources of
Right.
revenue as much. Or if the tariffs are generating more revenue, we can do things like pay off debt. So that's another side of it. So it's not just about necessarily bringing back jobs. But the other part of it that I think is interesting too, which I've heard Trump talk about, and I agree with to some extent, and it's the idea that there are certain manufacturing industries that are so
Mhm.
critical to things like national security that we can't
Absolutely.
afford to not be able to do them. And it's like refining steel and aluminum and various things like that, where
Yeah.
it's not even so much
Chips.
that you're necessarily going to bring these jobs back. It's that you have to have this homegrown industry because you can't afford to not
Yeah.
have it if something goes kablooey with China. So as I say, the whole discussion around tariffs is actually I think, very interesting because I mean, you could do a lot with it. I think you could also do a really bad job with it. I think it could be really harmful. But it's also so early on, and Trump obviously uses tariffs as a negotiating tactic. Anybody says anything, he's like, "Well, I'm going to hit you with a 90% tariff,"
Right.
and so he doesn't, and he almost never actually ends up doing that or keeping it in place for a very long
No.
time, trying to get, some sort of trade balance. And the other part of it is like European countries. So if you take Europe, the EU, Europe as a whole, it's got about the same size economy as the United States. And the countries within the EU slap all kinds of tariffs on
Oh yeah,
Americans. So it's like, let's say, because I've heard about a little bit about Germany. Germany has a lot of tariffs on U.S. imports, and so let's say we look at Germany and say, okay, well, you're tariffing us this amount, so we're going to do the same thing, and then that makes the Germans really unhappy, and maybe we can agree that everybody brings tariffs down. Well, that's good for us. Now we're not now we're not paying as much tariffs, and Germany kind of goes back to having the status quo. So I think at least looking at these imbalances and the way things work, I think is a good thing. And the other part of it is if you have a country like China that employs slave labor
right.
uh, to have really cheap labor, which is, the cost of labor is why you move your manufacturing to someplace else. It's not just that we want to come on balance with, their labor costs. It's that why are we giving an advantage to countries that provide slave labor? I mean, that to me,
Exactly.
I mean, it's disgusting. So I think you could almost say that tariffs on countries like that, you know, are maybe worthwhile just because we shouldn't be accepting the idea of slave labor around the world anymore.
No, absolutely. And the irony of particular situation is that actually should be a progressive
Yeah,
calling card. Because I mean, if you're really looking at humans, and that's your big concern, you want to be empathetic. It kind of goes back to the immigration stuff too, undocumented, black market labor stuff. If you're really trying to help people around the world, well, the fact that we're buying iPhones every day is not really helping in that situation. The way,
right.
and not to, and I say iPhones, it could be any number of products, right? So that's where just opening our mind to what the whole picture is to your point is you just hope people start thinking about it beyond this surface level that Trump's doing this or the Democrats are doing that or whatever, and really get down to really understand to a better degree what is really behind some of these things. I think the main issue with Trump and where I keep seeing him shoot himself in the foot is just the way in which he's going about it. That it's just causing
Yeah.
so much animosity and chaos and building into the fears of people who don't like his style, that he's going to become a dictator and all these kinds of things. And so that just doesn't seem to be productive to me. That's just not a way about going about it. But if you strip all that away, you know, let's have an open discussion about some of these things.
Yeah, because another thing that, in addition to always talking about cost, you know, one of the things that gets talked about a lot too is like our environment, global warming, and we're all going to be drowning in the ocean in a few months.
Right.
But the thing is, if you could move the manufacturing base from a coal-based electrical economy like India and China back to a essentially gas-based for now
Right.
economy in like the United States, well, the pollution caused by all that manufacturing would go way, way down. So there's like environmental impacts potentially tied in with tariffs. You know,
Right.
labor in the slave labor context of things, immigration context could go in with labor because I mean, if a lot of jobs and stuff crossing back and forth across the Mexican border has to do with labor being in Mexico cheaper than it is in the United States.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's like it's a very complicated issue that I think is definitely worth addressing. And if in any way you can use that in combination with better efficiency, better energy generation, like let's say we got some more manufacturing coming back in the United States and that started to put a toll on our electrical grid. Well, that would make people want to do something to improve, our electrical generation and our grid. And if that pushed us towards, in my opinion, nuclear, which, I'm a big proponent of and I support a lot, that would be even better. Because my solution to global warming has always sort of been, okay, everybody's using coal. Well, switch coal to gas. Now you're reducing emissions by a massive amount. And while you're doing that, start switching gas to nuclear. And now you're not emitting anything. And if you can do that sort of in a smart way, you can keep your baseload energy generation and all the things that you need to have a constant energy source with, renewables and solar and wind and all the things that aren't particularly reliable, but, are things that people like. You can scatter those around in too. And now you've got more manufacturing that's cheaper, more efficient, is using clean energy. It's like a win-win-win-win-win, however many wins you want to tack onto it. So it's like you can get a lot of good things, and you could say that a lot of that starts with tariffs and our trade policies. But again, it's in the long run, it's very complicated. And as far as the Trump administration goes, again, I just have to say, it's like, let's see where we are in a year.
Right.
If the tariffs and all the things that Trump is proposing, is having a good effect on the economy and maybe a good effect in other areas too, like, employment or the environment or whatever, then we all should be like, okay, reasonable tariffs seem to work. If they don't, then we just say, okay, tariffs really are bad and we need to go back to the whole NAFTA thing and just free trade and everything goes everywhere. But
Right.
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's funny. One of the things that I was thinking about talking today was about Medicare, which is another
Yep.
hyper complex issue. But it's
Yeah.
like when you start talking about trade as a whole and the way it affects everything and how the economy works or makes money, I mean, it starts to be very, very complicated. And I think and honestly, let's go back to the third party again, because this is our thing. This is what we like to harp on. When you have a complex issue that there is no actual 100% right policy. Every policy has its advantages and disadvantages. Everything's going to give you a little bit here and take a little bit somewhere else. The more people you have thinking about it, discussing it, and the more people you bring in that have potentially good ideas or potentially things that you want to try, well, the better solution you eventually come up with. So it's like, why support a third party? Because I want more ideas. I
Right.
want more solutions to things. That's why I support a third party.
Well, and I think the other part of the thinking is also focusing on truly the solutions, not the band-aids. And in
Yeah.
respect to that, like I was reading in the paper this morning about the San Diego, and again, going back to local,
Yeah.
the San Diego Union School District voted 8-0 that they're going to start working on affordable housing for their employees. And it's like they're going to try and build 1,500 units somehow, magically,
Yeah.
because cost of, and it's like, this is a classic example of putting a band-aid when we're not on something that we don't have a real solution for. And it's like, I don't even know how you would, considering they're already cutting budgets
Yeah. I
because
know.
they don't have
How are
enough
they going
money
to
for
do this
teaching.
exactly?
How do you start building housing units? And I understand the intention behind it. They want to make this a place that you can live and work at the same place. I get it. We all
Yeah.
want that, but that's not gonna solve the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
the overall issue is cost of living, just the ability to survive financially.
Yeah.
And it's great that a few people might get a lower cost home if they somehow figure out how to do this. I still don't even know how they're planning on paying for it. But
Yeah.
even if they pull that off somehow, that's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah. It's because it's such a vague proposal. It's like it's almost impossible to comment on intelligently because you really have no idea how they're even going to go about this. But I think it still goes back to this basic principle where, you know, let's say the public schools come up with a way to build houses. Well, it's got to be financed somehow. So are they
Yeah.
going to take money out of the education budget? So it's like, well, we're going to build houses for a few years, so your kids are going to get, a 6 month vacation here while we start trying to start building houses. So, but let's say they're not going to do that. Let's say that they're going to do the same thing, pay the same amount of money they've always paid for the educational costs and the administrative costs and all the other costs they bear. Plus now this additional huge cost of building however many houses they think that they're going to build. And it's like, well, how do you pay for that? Okay, so more taxes, which is more cost. So now your teachers who
Right.
pay taxes are losing money in taxes so that they can gain money in a house. It's kind of there's no
It's just a spiral. Yeah.
right, it's just a spiral. All you're doing is because you're constantly raising the cost of living, what you're going to end up doing is just making incredibly expensive houses. And you say that you're going to try and give them away, but that money's all going to come from somewhere. Again, I think my new slogan for this show is, well, you're raising the price of eggs. So that's what you're doing. So eventually, you're going to be paying $400 for an egg because you're trying to make all this free stuff for everybody, and you can't do it.
Yeah. Well, again, and back to your point about having more ideas, I think that is critically what we need. We do have this lack of imagination. Okay, let's figure out a way out of this hole, out of this box in some other way that actually truly lowers costs. And again, it's so complicated, but we can't keep trying to put band-aids on things. And
Yeah,
that's what we keep trying to do. And it's not going to get solved that way because each in particular, you got, basically two voices right now. And we need four, five, 10 voices to try and get us out of this rut, particularly in California, although I think it's happening everywhere. I mean, Texas and Florida and places like that, they're all starting to suffer under cost of living issues,
oh yeah, yep.
for different reasons, but it's at the end of the day, it's cost of living. So that's where I think we just have to keep harping on. Hey, third parties are not about trying to be spoilers. It's really trying to get people to just stop and think.
Yeah, and to have new ideas in the system and have new
Yeah,
opportunities. Because again, the one thing you can say about California is the things that we've been doing over and over again, being enacted by the same people over and over again, are not really working. I mean, that's why everybody's complaining about things. It's like, well, we don't have affordable housing. So you're going to elect the same people to do the same things? Well, you're still not going to have affordable housing, obviously, because they caused the affordable housing problem. It's like, oh, well, we have too many homeless people on the street. So you're going to elect the same people to do the same things? Well, then you're still going to have too many homeless people on the street. So until we can get out of the rut and at least inject some new blood and new ideas into the system, well, I mean, we're just going to keep on doing the same things. I mean, when you think about the schools saying that they want to build houses, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you're the teachers union, you want more money. So you propose something that costs a lot of money. And then the politicians that you fund give you that money, which is what you wanted in the first place. And then you give that money to your favorite NGO, who then kicks money back to the politician, who you're also funding because you're the union. And it's like, does anyone think, really, that system is going to build affordable housing? Because what they're really going to do is they're going to build another bullet train, just like the one they haven't built yet.
hey, there was I'll try and find it and put in the show notes too about the number of lobbyists that whole profession, how
Mm.
is it's exploded over the last 30, 40 years. I mean, it's mind boggling how many more lobbyists are. Just the lobbyists alone cost money,
Yeah.
let alone the money that they funnel into. And it's you can it's you use the teachers group as one example, but it goes across industries, right? I mean
Oh, yeah.
tech the tech industry, I mean, billions of dollars that they're pouring into it. Elon Musk is, what is it? Is it in Wisconsin or whatever? They got a race coming up for some positions just here real soon that are really focused on the Supreme Court for
Mm.
whatever the state. I think it's Wisconsin, and he's like poured in like 10 or $20 million, basically saying, "If you vote, I'll pay you $100." He's back to that thing again.
Yeah.
It's like again, that's why I always come back. How you get to campaign finance reform is part of the solution, not the complete solution, but it's part of the solution because just follow the money. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, again, campaign finance reform, I think, is in some ways the ultimate issue for a third party because
yeah,
obviously the two parties that exist currently don't want campaign finance reform
no,
because they have a lot of money. And in
yeah,
fact, they use that money influence in their ability to sort of control the way things work, in fact, to keep third parties or other groups of people from rising up and challenging them. So obviously, they're not motivated to do anything about campaign finance. So again, third party stuff, if you want to find a way to change campaign finance, you have to have an actual political party that would benefit from changing campaign finance.
right,
But right now we don't have that. So you get this merry-go-round of grift essentially where both sides have plenty of money and plenty of millionaires to do plenty of unscrupulous
exactly.
things. And so They do. But until you get somebody to come along to say, "Hey, look, I want to collect up all the people that are dissatisfied with this, well, oligarchy, if you want to call it that." I
Yep.
don't exactly agree with that term, but we'll just use it. All the people that don't like the oligarchy, vote for me, because then it will be in my best interest to get rid of the oligarchy, because everybody who votes for me because I'm getting rid of the oligarchy.
Right.
And until you have something like that, it's not going to change.
Yep. Yep. And that's the challenge, because you got to find that in that charismatic. And again, we kind of, I think the actual opportunity is on the local level to
Yeah.
try and find a charismatic, benevolent billionaire who will help, who
Yeah.
will, who will help the common man and woman. That's going to be a stretch.
Yeah.
It's going to be a hard one. I think we have a much better shot is building from the ground up, focusing on the local stuff, where you at least have some leverage. And
Yeah.
because the whole battle of powers right now at that level is just good luck.
Well, for years living in California, I've always thought that California is the absolute optimum place for there to be a third party revolution. First of all, there's a lot of money in California. There's no
Yep.
question about it. And so there's a lot of people that could be funded by a lot of people in California so that they could be competitive, even on the financing level. But also, there's only one party in California. So all these disaffected people, which is, I don't know, 70% of California's population, probably,
Yeah.
that are waiting around for something to come along that they can vote for that they think actually has a chance of being worthwhile or winning. So have somebody with an idea come along and start something. Like, we were involved in some third parties that had some potential, but they spiraled into oblivion, unfortunately, as far as I can tell.
Right.
But there's always this chance that somebody will just come along and say, "Okay, look, we're gonna do this the right way. We're gonna challenge the authority. We're gonna bring in some new ideas. We're gonna try and change the way things are done. Let's get all the people who are dissatisfied with things and put together a new party." And then once that new party is established in California and can actually demonstrate that it can govern and do some good
Right.
things, you have some people now that have experience and are maybe known throughout the nation, and now you can start, moving out and having a nationwide party that also wants to get things done and fix things and have new ideas. But I think California is a perfect place for it to start. And again, this goes back to the very beginning of a podcast of the people like us or hate us. I just want people to think about things, because
Exactly.
there's so
That's
much
the whole
potential
point.
out there. And like, from the very beginning of doing this podcast, I talked about trying to make my own political party. I knew that it was a pipe dream, but it was interesting to look into. And I've looked at it and I've tried it, and I don't have the
Yeah.
resources. Like, people say, I'm an old guy. You know, I'm pretty much
Hey,
a
I'm with you. I'm
spiritualist.
older than you, I'm sure.
But there are plenty of people out here that could. And all I want to say is, just out into the universe, into the internet, whoever may or may not see this, if you want to do it, do it. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, there's tons of people that will support a new party. There are tons of good ideas out there. It's not just us who have ideas, or we're trying to,
Obviously, yeah.
say things. I mean, there's tons of ways to bring people together to do something different. Just don't fall into the trap of, I maybe won't win this election, so I'm gonna, go back to supporting the Democrats. Like, I hate to harp on Andrew Yang too much, or even give him any kind of publicity, but I mean, he went through the trouble of starting a third party, and now
Yep.
he just supports Democrats. Well, what's the point of that? That doesn't make any sense. So,
Right.
there are people that have the wherewithal and the knowledge and the drive to do these things. We just have to hope that somebody is willing to come along and sort of take on that mantle and be like, "Hey, let's do
Yeah.
something new."
Well, yeah. In the meantime, we do what we can do and try and, spread the idea of just opening minds and that sort of thing. One thing that, maybe it's a pipe dream as well, but since we've got a little bit of time before the next, midterms and stuff like that, I keep thinking, again, focusing local, trying to come up with some kind of scale that we can measure, or not measure, but at least evaluate the candidates that are running for certain things, whether it's state legislatures or
Mhm.
city councils, based on actually, I really liked what you'd suggested the last podcast or two. I think it was last time about focusing on transparency, reducing costs, and infrastructure, because those three and intermixed and all that, kind of the foundation of that is campaign finance reform, because
Yeah,
all of those have pretty big lobbies behind them. But most people, their eyes glaze over when you talk about campaign finance reform, but they
yeah,
do get excited about reducing costs or doing something with infrastructure, right? And, being able to have sort of an honest evaluation of where these candidates really fall out along those three pillars, because that could have some influence, and like we've always said, it's like, hey, we still wish people would just deregister from both parties, but even
yeah,
if they don't, at least support those who, if it's a Democrat or a Republican who support some of these ideals, and that's fine too. And so that's something I want to keep thinking about and figuring out, is there a practical way we can do that? Just starting at small in the local area, because we got people already starting to run for like county council and stuff that isn't happening for almost 2 years here.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, well, this is our opportunity to measure them and put your feet to the fire and see, are they really focused on the issues that are going to make the most impact for solutions, not just putting band-aids on stuff.
yeah. Yeah, as I say, it would sure be nice. And another thing that happens a lot is that I think people in California are very discouraged. So you have a lot of people that run unopposed a lot of the time. And
Absolutely.
I think from time to time, there are people who are doing a good enough job that running against them maybe doesn't make sense. But for the most part, I would say nobody should ever run unopposed in
Yeah,
California. Not the way things are going in this state.
right. No, absolutely. No, I totally agree. Well, no, that's good. Well, sorry to get off on tariffs and
Well, no, yeah,
but I was just like fascinated by the whole concept of, there's been so much activity around how much employment's going to be generated if we bring all these things back, and it's like, well, maybe not. And but they're definitely. It's not to say tariffs in general aren't in concept a bad, necessarily bad or good thing.
yeah.
Um, and so, anyways, it's just again opening the minds, man. I never really looked at it until this last week when some of this tariff stuff started going on. So,
Yeah. Well, I just would say, again to the audience, whoever they may be, think about things. Come up with ideas.
right,
One of the things is that I always say is that if all you're going to do is complain, you should just shut up because you're just
yeah,
complaining, you're not helping anything.
no,
So I know on this show, I mean, you may disagree with me and you may think that I'm a total crackpot. I'm sure there are a lot of people who do. But I at least try and suggest ideas about how to do things or a better course to take or,
right,
a different program, a way to make things different, And as I say, it's fine if you think I'm a total crazy nut job. That's fine. You do not have to agree with me.
right,
But when you start talking about things with people in any avenue of anything, make your point about why you don't like what's going on. But then at the end of it, suggest something better. As
right,
long as we start doing that more, not just complaining, but actually suggesting something better, then I think things have a much better chance of getting better.
yeah, yeah. No, that's ultimately what it should all be about. All right. Well, that should get us. Well, we're past due again. Um, don't get us on a roll, because two old guys, complaining. We're gonna get more of that, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
But
Oh,
I
yeah.
love it.